circle of rat back and I'm going and leaving tracks and mourning. And I don't give a crap whether you streaming, you torrent this. You can try to contest, but you'll be needing an army. Beat them in Normandy, current rappers eat to the warning stone.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. Now today is going to be a very special reaction video, which I don't do a lot of. A subscriber sent me an email that had this article in it. Now, normally I would probably save this for the Q&A, but because this article actually coincides with something else that I saw, which was a quote from Raven. So we're going to talk about that later, but this article is, why do old men keep making professional wrestling look bad? It's from Top 5 Wrestling on No DQ, and had the audacity, the unmitigated gall to post this thing on my hallowed and sacred birthday of April the 4th. So it is as you thought it would be. From No DQ and this Top 5 Wrestling guy. Look, I don't always read these op-eds. Sometimes I skim through them. And I skimmed through this one just to see what the hell it was about. But somebody asked me to talk about it. I figure I got a couple of minutes. Let's go through it. How about it? I'm not going to go through the entire thing because it'll probably take too long. So let's get through some of the major points. So he says, quote, "This is going to sound like an ageist piece of writing. I promise it is not that at all. There are plenty of veterans in this business that have kept up with the times, or at the least understand that professional wrestling has changed from what it was 20 to 30 years ago, and have embraced it." Then he gives a list of names, which includes Triple H and Sting and Tony Schiavone and William Regal. He says all names that have either kept up with the times, some even with an old school mindset, or continue to help evolve the sport in some manner. I respect and appreciate every one of these dudes. They understand the following concept. You can learn from the past, but you shouldn't live in it. All right. Who says you have to live in the past? I'm pretty sure nobody he's going to mention talks about living in the past. Some basically just speak basic reality, but whatever. So he goes into a tirade about Vince McMahon. So it says, speaking of which, Vince McMahon is back in creative. Are you not excited after last week's alleged worst post-WrestleMania Raw ever? And we are not thrilled at the prospects of everything just being the same shit, different night. It seems that way. WWE fans keep tuning in for an exciting change from what it was. As soon as things look up, one wealthy old fart finds a way to dash everyone's hopes. So then he goes into the stuff about Vince. And he says, quote, "A pitiful man with a God complex who has now seemingly nudged his way back into WWE creative once more. Can you think of any other reason other than this is all he knows in the world, that McMahon is willing to work until he takes his last breath at the gorilla position? I am not inside McMahon's head, though I imagine it's a whirlwind of scantily clad women chopping the heads off anyone who sneezes in his direction, whilst stand back blares in the background. In my mind, Vince McMahon is a symptom of a bigger problem. The back in my day mentality of professional wrestling elders." Let's pause right here. Now, here's a weird thing. I know this is kind of odd, but Vince is actually fairly progressive thinking for a man his age and for somebody who is in a business. Okay. Before, I know a lot of people say a lot of things about Vince, and some of those things are true. Some of them are. I ended up being like the chief #1 Vince protector on the internet. But some of the things I think people say about him are genuinely unfair. Like, if you think that all Vince cares about is scantily clad women, then you don't understand that he tried to push females wrestling in the 80s with Rockin' Robin and Sherry and, Wendy Richter and all this kind of stuff. There was a women's match at WrestleMania years ago, a legitimate women. There was women's tag team titles in the 80s. Vince was trying to make women's wrestling work way back then, and it didn't click. Nobody gave a shit. It was ahead of its time. He tried it again in the 90s. Alundra Blaze, Bull Nakano, Aja Kong, Bertha Faye. He brought them all in. It didn't click. Nobody cared about women's wrestling at that point. It seems that everybody has decided that Vince's only, thoughts about women's wrestling is that short amount of time where there was bra and panties matches and lingerie pillow fights, which ended up being coinciding with the most popularity of the entire goddamn company and the entire business. Nobody cared about women's wrestling. Now, I know that this is something that the progressive wrestling fans, they can't get this through their minds. They can't handle this. But yes, Vince McMahon tried this 30 years ago before your precious knockouts. Vince was trying to make women's wrestling in the United States happen. Even bringing Japanese women over to try to make it happen. It did not work. Nobody cared. Okay? I know that you just don't get it. Nobody cared. Also, let's talk about this. It was Vince McMahon that blew up NXT, right? Turned NXT into NXT 2.0. Stop focusing on all these 40-year-old indie wrestlers. Now let's go straight to the young athletes. What happened? All guys like this, guys like all of these people on the internet, they complained, they bitched and moaned. All these people are green. We don't know who they are. Why is it everything rap now? Why is there no rock music? It's all rap and all this kind of shit. You talk about staying ahead of the times. Every fucking song on the radio was rap now. Oh my goodness. NXT should hold on to Poppy and not embrace the hip hop generation. And it's the 70-year-old man saying, hip hop, pal, that's what the kids are listening to. And you're like, no, the kids are listening to Poppy. It's like, what fucking kids are listening to Poppy? That was Triple H. All right. I never even heard of that motherfucker until Triple H brought her on screen in NXT. I don't know half the people in, rappers these days. But the flip of NXT 2.0, focus on the youth, which is what they claimed WWE wasn't doing. Again, remember they were doing these gimmicks. I think the What Culture guys were doing what's the combined age of the wrestlers in these matches gimmick when Edge was running towards the main event and they thought he was going to be world champion. They was like, what's the combined age of all the wrestlers in this match? And then they was like, the combined age of this match for AEW would be like 45. Because I think it was like MJF and Sammy Guevara or something like that. As if talent is indicative of age. But then when WWE did the opposite, they got rid of all the old guys. They fired some of them. They Karrion Kross, Samoa Joe, Keith Lee. These guys are like 35 plus. They got rid of them. They complained. We were told, hell, I even did a video where Dave Meltzer says that declines in your 18 to 35 coincide with you not having any stars under the age of 30. Oh, well, if that were true, which I disagreed with at the time because I knew it was bullshit, I just looked at the statistics. Hulk Hogan was in his 30s. Bret Hart was in his 30s. Shawn was in his 30s. Austin was in his 30s. All of them were over the age of 30 when they became world champion and the top guy in the company. I knew it was bullshit at the time, but that's the narrative that the wrestling media was pushing at that time. So if you're going to be, you need to be up with the times. Okay, which times? Is it going to be up with the times where we're all still watching all these Ring of Honor washouts like Danielson and Punk? And we're not watching any of the new guys like Brian Breaker and Grayson Waller. We can't watch them. We have to watch fucking Samoa Joe, who's 46 years old and winded all the time. Oh no, Bryan Danielson and what the fuck is his name? Christopher Daniels. They're about to have a match. Like, who cares? But that's what AEW is doing. So it was right when they were doing it. It was wrong when WWE was running 23-year-olds in the main event. That was wrong. It's supposed to be guys who are in their 30s. You got to be seasoned. It's bullshit. So this whole cultural argument about who's got their pulse on what is absolute garbage. Right off rip, because your culture is fickle. There's no stability there, and you're not making a legitimate argument from a legitimate position. It's all garbage. Now, another thing that NXT did, is they started tapping into a little bit of the cultural side. So you got Roxanne Perez with this boring ass social anxiety stuff that she's doing. She's essentially a billboard for mental illness. It's the same crap that they do in AEW, which you have the Hangman Page, what they said he was a depressed cowboy or some shit. Like, nobody cares about this stuff. Nobody is watching wrestling to get a PSA on your anxiety or, how you're a shy guy or anything like that. Nobody gives a shit. And plus, when it comes to making fun of people, let's say, as long as it's not you, then it's perfectly fine. We can make fun of, I don't know, Trump supporters. We can have a wrestler like the progressive liberal. You can make fun of Trump supporters. You can make fun of all that kind of stuff. But heavens to Betsy, you have a Joe Gacy who makes fun of the woke cult. Oh, do you remember when the woke cult thing started happening? When Joe Gacy first started doing his gimmick? Everybody who was a progressive, which is pretty much the entire wrestling media, hated that gimmick, wanted nothing to do with it. Was talking about how terrible it was, how terrible he was. And they were even going around saying that Joe Gacy was canceled. Oh, he got rid of him. They took him off the air because we complained, y'all. They got rid of Joe Gacy because we complained, y'all. It's like, no, Joe Gacy's still around today. So when you say that old men are holding the business back, is it the old men or is it your ever-changing standards that's really holding the business back? Let's move on because they're going to talk about some other people here. So it says, when Mark Calloway made his cringy real men comment in 2021, it was met with mostly negative feedback. I mean, why would anyone want to feel safe and take care of their physical and mental health? Why play video games when you can instead do a ton of cocaine, inject steroids, and play with guns and knives like they did back in the good old days of pro wrestling? Don't you know you must suffer like your elders did to gain any respect? Okay, we've talked about the Undertaker part before, but for those of you who are sort of new, understand, Undertaker is talking a lot, not just about people going out and doing drugs. He's also talking about the camaraderie that comes with working in the business. Kevin Nash talked about this. Stone Cold Steve Austin talked about this. There was a time where they used to run weaklings out of the business, where a guy you would pay him $300 to train you. He'd make you do 10,000 Hindu squats, and then you puke, throw up, and quit. And then he'd go to the locker room and tell everybody, yeah, stupid kid gave me $300, but he quit. Day one, quit, didn't come back. And everybody sit around and laugh at you because that guy who took your money and ran you off, he protected the business. He not only did not go out and expose the business, he protected the business. And in protecting the business, he showed that he could be trusted. He was able to build camaraderie with his friends and his coworkers, the people that he was working with. If you would have made it through that, then you would have showed toughness, that you really wanted to be in the wrestling business, that you were somebody that other people would feel comfortable laying down for, that you would feel comfortable being slammed by. All right. You were worthy of being with them. A lot of these guys were legitimate athletes, football players, basketball players. Some of them were even professional on like NFL level football players or college level wrestlers and football players. Like, these guys were tough dudes who took their job seriously. That's part of what he was talking about here. And in doing so, they do create a hierarchy. And, that comes with jocks in general. That comes with males in general. In any endeavor in human life, there's going to be a hierarchy. There's always going to be people who are better than you at something, and then they end up taking the leadership position. And then as the leaders, they start to dictate terms. It's just kind of how it is. Whether it's you're the dungeon master and Dungeons and Dragons, or you're the star football team, you're the star of the football team, whatever. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. Okay. But the idea that guys should have carried guns and knives and did drugs, he never said any of that stuff. He merely said that these were the kinds of guys who were in the business before, were dangerous men. Okay? Guys who could protect the business, guys who could protect themselves, guys who were tough. You know? Now, obviously, that has gone too far. Bruiser Brody got stabbed because he had a reputation for being a bully. So he got stabbed in Puerto Rico and he got killed. You know, Bruiser Brody was one of Undertaker's mentors. He obviously knows that you can go too far. A lot of his friends died because they were mixing drugs and alcohol, because they were doing a lot of drugs and alcohol. He did not say that guys should go do drugs and alcohol. He's saying that there are a certain kind of guy who is in the locker room now where he's basically a giant child. Okay? He's tweeting, passive aggressively, playing video games, sketching out his match move by move. These guys have been talking about this stuff forever. It's not like Undertaker created this argument. Nash talked about this years before Undertaker did. He was still wrestling in the locker room with some of these guys when these people were doing this stuff. Again, Randy Savage was sketching out his moves in the 80s. And people used to say, Randy, what the hell are you doing? I'm not doing everything move by move like this. But that's the way he worked. That's the way he wanted to do things. And it changed. It literally changed. And, Bret Hart started laying matches out for guys, and Shawn started laying matches out for guys. So yes, it did. That part of the business did actually change. But what did not change was the camaraderie that was necessary. Protecting the business, protecting yourself, being somebody that other people can rely on in the business. That's not the case anymore. Now you've got guys who can't wait to run to the internet to try to rat out each other or turn their back on each other or stab each other in the back or anything else. Spill locker room gossip on their podcast or whatever the fuck. Guys who go out here and complain about their hurt feelings, like FTR Bald, literally all the time talking about who hurt his feelings this week. How I can't feed my daughter this week. Like, people do get tired of that shit. We know that you're normal people, but come on. At least keep the veil up a little bit. Let's move on Let's move on. The next, there have been a slew of outdated, racist, sexist, homophobic, or just downright LOL okay grandpa statements and actions made over the last few years by a large group of wrestling elders. There's too many to list here. And he's talking about Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, yada, yada, yada. He says, most recently, the old man shakes fist at clouds award goes to Rick Steiner, who recently made a transphobic comment toward Impact star Giselle Shaw. This isn't about cancel culture, which is just a blanket term for those who complain when they can't be insensitive towards others anymore. Steiner insulted another human being simply for choosing to live their life how they wish. How is it not to insult another person just for being themselves? We're all just clumps of atoms, cells, synapses, hormones, and flesh. Who cares who identifies as what? Just live your life and let others live their lives. How nice. That sounds completely and totally reasonable. And as a libertarian, I completely and totally agree with it. That is, until they start changing the laws. That is, until the government starts spending taxpayer money on it. That is, until they can legally lie to you about who and what they are. That is, until they start changing textbooks and changing what the word man and woman means. When you have children learning that men can get pregnant, I'm sorry, we have a problem. All right? That has nothing to do with Giselle Shaw, by the way. But we have a problem. All right? That's factually incorrect. We have a problem. When you can't say that in public, that is a problem. When you can start saying that a man with a gaping wound in between his legs is menstruating, we have a problem. We're off the track. We're beyond live and let live at this point. All right? We're beyond, when you want to have, I'm not even talking about the drag queens and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the bare bones, basic biology no longer matters. When you have female men and male women, makes no sense. And when that is enforced culturally and then attempted to be enforced in law so that 16-year-old boys who have gone through puberty are now on your daughter's swimming team and her basketball team and her wrestling team. And, these things matter at this point. We're beyond the fact of live and let live. All right. These things have real cultural impact. And this is not anything anybody believes 5 years ago, which is why I'm saying this stuff is fickle. Look in the mirror. Anybody within the sound of my voice, and you disagree with what I just said, look in the mirror and say to yourself that 15 years ago, you would have believed the same damn thing you're saying right now. Look in the mirror and say way back in what would have been 2007, you would have felt comfortable going in person, telling people men can get pregnant. You would have felt comfortable saying that in 2006 or 2000. People would have laughed you out of any room on planet Earth. People would have looked at you like you were out of your goddamn mind. Oh, but now you Mongo, you have to keep up with the times. So like, what the fuck is the times? What is it? What if the times are wrong? The times are wrong. Okay? I don't care about your politically motivated times. Your times are wrong. This is what I mean by chasing this fictional, fickle culture. That today, what you say is wrong today will be right in 15 years. What you say is right today will be wrong tomorrow. And you'll be forever chasing that bunny all over the place. No, you know what the facts are. Now, I have said on this channel already, I disagree with the way Rick Steiner handled this situation, assuming that it happened the way Giselle Shaw said it happened, which is that Rick Steiner, for no reason, just started yelling at Giselle Shaw. Assuming it happened that way, it was wrong. Now, is there any other context? We don't know. But I disagree with, attacking people for no reason. But I also, I vehemently disagree with your attempt to change human language, to change human biology. That, men can get pregnant is the absolute most brain dead thing that you can say. And it's quite frankly a dead issue with me. I'm not going to debate whether men can get pregnant or not. It's like debating whether I have been hit by the moon. There is nothing to debate. It clearly did not happen. It's clearly not occurring. All right. So let's move on. His third piece of business. Bret Hart was one of my favorite wrestlers growing up. Unfortunately, he also criticized the modern day sport. In his mind, leg slapping during super kicks takes away the credibility of the sport and makes it seem like it's less real. I don't think MMA fighters stomp their foot on the ground while throwing a punch like Bret did many times in his career. I don't believe human beings purposefully run full speed into the ropes from a real Irish whip or willingly get slingshot into the turnbuckle. The suspension of belief in pro wrestling was lost a long time ago as more fans became wise to what is going on. What these older personalities are doing is actually insulting the modern fan base, not modern pro wrestling. So, your modern pro wrestlers is about as phony as a $3 bill, as they say. Look, we all know that movies aren't real. It's your job as an actor, whoever your favorite actor, Leonardo DiCaprio, let's say. It's Leonardo DiCaprio's job to make you believe for that 2 to 3 hours that he is that character he is playing on the screen. That the conflict of that movie is real. That character cares about that thing that they're trying to get into this movie. They care. They have a real desire that this person is a real human being. That is your job as an actor, is to make people believe that the emotions that you're trying to convey are real or realistic. And realistic for that moment, for that situation, for that character. It is very complex. All right? Very, very complex. That's your job. I know it's phony. I know it's not real. I know that Leonardo DiCaprio is not really a slaveholder, and Samuel L. Jackson is not really a slave. But for the purpose of this movie, That is the situation. That is the characters that these guys are playing. It's their job to bring me into that story and to make me believe it. If you're a wrestler, your job is the exact same damn thing. It's to make the match look as believable as possible. Wrestling is literally fake fighting. That's literally the job. If it doesn't look like a fight, you're doing something wrong. And I know that you think that modern wrestling should be gymnastics. It's wrong. Okay? That's literally not your job. Your job is not to be the world's best gymnast in between the ropes. Your job is to make it look like a legitimate fight. That's your job. The further away you get from the legitimate fight, the worse you are doing your job. Just like if you go to a movie theater and you see a movie that is no way the actors are not acting in a way that is consistent in the context of the movie, they're doing something wrong. They're taking you out of the movie. If the character is laughing at inappropriate times and it doesn't make sense for the character, but the actor thinks it's funny, I'm just going to laugh right here. It doesn't fit the character, it doesn't fit the moment, but I feel like laughing. It's going to take people out of the moment. Same thing happens in wrestling. If a guy starts giggling in the middle of the ring, it's like, what kind of fight is this? That you're giggling. I don't mean like a mocking laughter. You know the difference. We don't have to break it down for you. But this kind of thing is very frustrating to me because it's another one of those things where we know that there are boom mics and there's green screens and all kinds of stuff when it comes to movies. I don't need to see any of that crap, nor do I really want you talking too much about it. And you're not supposed to bring attention to it. You're not supposed to bring attention to the fact that the movie is not real. Constantly bringing attention to the fact that the movie is not real is a problem with the movie. It's a problem. I know that I know it hurts your feelings, but it's a fact. Realism is literally your job as a pro wrestler. It's literally your job. Your job is to make the product look as real as possible. When people are doing obviously phony shit, like slow motion matches, obviously phony hardcore matches where they're stabbing each other in the head with forks, and then somebody's clearly blading on TV, all that stuff takes people out of it. It looks Bush League. It's like if you watch one of these shitty Tubi movies and people are looking dead in the camera talking, the boom mic is all in the shot. You hear cut and action all over in the back. They're like, okay, we know that motherfucker is there. I don't want to hear him. I don't want to see him. Realism is literally your job. You're offending me by not doing your job or by telling me that it's not my job to make it look real. It's my job to go out there and do ridiculous shit. I can't stand this. It's incredibly infantilizing. You would think that a wrestling fan would actually watch wrestling for fucking wrestling. This guy says this: pro wrestling evolved to meet the needs of the fan base. I'm sorry, but headlock takeovers and back body drops just aren't exciting. Yes, you need emotion and selling from the storytelling aspect, but this can be done with a faster, more exciting moveset. Most honest fans aren't worried about the slapping noise of a super kick. Leg slapping in wrestling has been around for decades, long before the Young Bucks and the Usos. Listen, he didn't say they created it. He's saying they do it too much, which is objectively true. Just like Jim Ross and everybody else says, essentially, you shouldn't throw too many closed hand punches. Why? Because people know boxing exists. People know MMA exists. If you keep throwing fucking closed fist punches and there's no bruising, there's no busted eyes, there's no busted lips, there's no missing teeth, people are going to say it's fake. So that's why wrestling had the rules of no closed fist punches, so that you wouldn't expose the fucking business. That's why guys got into chops, overhand chops, or knife edge chops, to avoid the argument of, hey, why aren't these guys losing any teeth when they start punching each other in the head? Because you don't punch each other in the fucking head, you idiots. You don't leave a guy in a sleeper hold for 30 minutes. because it didn't take you that long to choke somebody out. But now we're in entertainmentville where you can have a guy in a guillotine for 15 fucking minutes because obviously he's not going to ever get choked out or go to sleep. I apparently have never seen an MMA fight in my life. It's stupid. What kind of wrestling fans don't understand basic fucking wrestling? Get a history book for Christ's fucking sake. Here's some humor near the end. Any wrestling evolution in history has taken place at the hands of fresh young minds. Whether it be McMahon himself in the 80s, Bischoff and Heyman during the 90s, or Khan right now with the true alternative AEW, at some point, wrestling elders need to step aside and realize that the future does not belong to them. They can give a good faith effort to contribute to such an evolution, but more than ever, they need to step aside. Step aside, old man. Except, interestingly enough, that Paul Heyman name just jumps out at me. Now, we're going to talk about this because I want to bridge this with the Raven quote that I saw on Cultaholic a couple of days ago. I didn't talk about it, but now is the perfect chance for me to talk about it. All right, so here's what Raven said. You have to stay current. That's always been a problem with the wrestling business. The bookers aren't current. They don't have any youth on the booking committee, so to speak, who know what pop culture is and what's trendy and what isn't. I think I would have been a great booker back in the 90s. Now I'm not as good as I would have been because even though my wrestling knowledge is more, my pop culture knowledge isn't. I'm 58 years old. I don't stay current anymore. So this is what Raven is talking about when he's talking about bookers. Now, this is only an issue if you are constantly chasing pop culture influence. Now, which it should not be your job, by the way. It shouldn't be your job as a wrestling promoter to chase trends. Because if you're a trend chaser, then you're asking for trouble. You know, again, how many people within the sound of my voice remember Mitchell and Ness jerseys? I used to know people who used to have a closet full of Mitchell and Ness jerseys, spent $200, $300 a pop on them joints. They would not be wearing them 4 years later. All right. They spent money on grills, you know, because Chameleonaire and Mike Jones and all these guys and Lil Wayne had a grill. How many people running around with dreadlocks right now? Not because they actually know anything about dreadlocks or because they have dreadlocks, but because Lil Wayne has dreadlocks. How many people go and get tattoos all over their faces or wearing blue or red rags or dressing in bathing apes or whatever the fuck, Balenciagas or whatever, spending tons of money chasing trends? You can chase trends all day. It doesn't make you cool to chase a trend. The real cool are the trendsetters. Those are the people who are really cool. And it's really sad that people don't understand that by chasing trends, you actually become a follower. You get dragged along. Okay. Now here's a couple of things when it comes to Raven. Now he was right in one big instance, proved him right. In 1986, Vern Gagne, who was in his 50s, he tried to counter WrestleMania. So the AWA, which he owned, decided to run what they call Wrestle Rock, which was going to be their version of WrestleMania. And his plan was to book Prince to perform at an AWA show. This was a great plan. Prince in the 80s was huge. Prince is from Minnesota. The show was going to be in Minnesota. Minnesota is the home of AWA. It was a great plan. It was fantastic. The problem was Vern Gagne didn't know anything that much about Prince. So Prince was filming a movie in France on the other side of the world when he planned this Wrestle Rock event. He then decided to go with the next best option, who was Waylon Jennings, a country music star. People were like, Waylon Jennings? What the hell are this guy talking about? You know, like, what the hell is this? This is a time where if you would have had a young booker, you could have fixed this problem. You know, maybe you couldn't get Prince. Maybe you could have gotten somebody else. All right. This is one of those times where Raven is absolutely correct. If Vern Gagne was younger, he might have picked somebody else outside of Waylon Jennings. But how often does this really happen? It doesn't happen that often. In terms of pop culture, WrestleMania is a big pop culture thing. In response to this on Twitter, I said, take the reaction that Slayer got when their song played at WrestleMania 39 this year and compare that to the reaction Lil Uzi Vert got, and he was physically in the building for WrestleMania. Compare those two responses. People were on their feet for Slayer. I had never heard of them. But apparently there's 70,000 people that were in that arena that actually knew who Slayer was. Nobody knew who the fuck Lil Uzi Vert was. He didn't get a reaction. Nobody cared. Nobody gave a shit. Now, I did some digging, and I think that song, South of Heaven from Slayer, came out in the 80s. Lil Uzi Vert wouldn't have even been born yet. So which one of them is more with the times? The song from the fucking 80s or the, 22, 23-year-old rapper, if he's that old? You can't chase fucking trends. You don't know what's hot. Hot to who, by the way? You have a multicultural audience. Half you motherfuckers didn't know who Bad Bunny was 5 years ago, and he was one of the biggest rappers on the planet Earth. You didn't know who he was. I don't even know who fucking Logan Paul is. All these wrestling fans don't care about who Logan Paul is. You can't sit here and say people are out of touch when they're doing this kind of shit. And Tony Khan is doing some shit where he's basically trying to play catch up. WWE ran Wembley Stadium in 1992, and he's doing it now. WWE did Mike Tyson back in 1998. I'm going to do it now. It's like, they had Snoop Dogg, we going to have Snoop Dogg. You're not on the cutting edge. You're just following trends. You're chasing that rabbit. You're chasing that antelope all over the goddamn forest. Instead of doing what you should be doing, which is setting your own trends, making your own stars. That's how shit works. Stars are not made by following trends. Stars are made by creating trends. That's the real star. So I've listened to a lot of Raven, and I've agreed with a lot of Raven. But this is one thing where he's just not right. Okay. You don't make it in this business by being a follower. You do it by being a leader. Paul Heyman was a great example. Heyman created a departure. He saw that WCW was kind of childish. He saw that WWF was childish. He decided to go mature. Bischoff started claiming that he was the creator of that demographic. He wasn't. Heyman and those guys in Philadelphia and New York were doing this stuff a long time ago. They were doing it in 92, 93. Before Heyman even went over there to ECW, they were doing this stuff. The hardcore wrestling, the matches with no rules, they were stealing stuff from Japan. It was a truly unique product that pushed the business forward. Problem with that, it was terrible business. Absolute terrible business. They damaged pretty much every relationship they had. They're bleeding on every show. There's glass, there's thumbtacks, there's fire, there's all kinds of stuff. How could you put that on TV? They're playing licensed music without permission. You can't do that on TV. So is ECW a cutting edge product? Absolutely. Was it a good business product? No. And guess what? It died for the business reasons. You can't cut each other on TV because this network doesn't want that. This network doesn't want you using licensed music. They don't want to have to pay for it. They want you to clean up your arena. It looks grimy and dirty in there. It's great when, nobody knows. But when you want to be on national TV, it's a little different. You have to put some lights in this motherfucker. Okay? You can't go on TV and start cursing. You can't do this stuff. You have to adjust. Paul Heyman's inability to adjust meant that even though he was a trendsetter, he was terrible at business and ended up losing his business. People are really saying the same thing to Tony Khan right now. He's gotten a lot of leeway with AEW. They've been on TV cursing. They even dropping F-bombs. It's a different time, though. Now cable's a little bit looser than it used to be. You know, they're blading on TV. It's a little looser than it used to be. There was a time where a lot of the things people complain about today would have been, not so good back then. So now we live in an era of slut walks, and you shouldn't hoe shame. If a woman wants to show off her body on OnlyFans or Instagram or whatever, that's perfectly fine. But heavens to Betsy, she has a lingerie pillow fight. Oh my God, I'm gonna have a Fred Sanford fucking heart attack. That somebody showed their shoulder blades on Monday Night Raw. Meanwhile, if she's ass naked on OnlyFans, that's perfectly fine. See, you see what I mean? When WWE was doing Playboy and all that kind of shit, they were complaining, they were bitching and whining. It was so uncouth. It's not right. They do OnlyFans. Oh, it's a great thing. It's good for the business. What? You're always being a little bunny bouncing around the forest, and you're sitting around here chasing it. It's stupid. Set trends. You don't follow trends. You have a business. You run your fucking business like a business. Yes, your partners may not want the same kind of content you want to provide. If that's not the case, you need to find a new provider. GCW, they talk about this all the time. They don't want to go mainstream because they don't want to have to compromise the product. Well, GCW is always going to be a shade above poverty for the entirety of its run. It has no desire to grow, no desire to change. And this was what Brett Lauderdale wants. That's how he wants the company to be. So yeah, GCW is kind of on the cutting edge. It's a modern day ECW. But he's essentially saying what we are right now is where we're going to be. Because when he went into the Hammerstein Ballroom, I think it was January 2022 or 2023, one of the two, and the show couldn't be as violent as the fans wanted it to be. His fans pissed up a rope. Oh, there was no blood on this show. There was no fire on this show. For a long time, Nick Gage wasn't even announced to be on the show. They gave him hell. And he realized he had to compromise because he was running a building and they were watching him. All right. They're like, look, they gave him a list of fucking rules. You can't do this stuff. And he followed every single one of them because this was the biggest thing he was ever going to be a part of. So he followed every single one of them goddamn rules. And people complained because he compromised the product. So he's like, oh, I can't do that again. My audience would be mad at me. All right, so guess what? Stay right where you are. Okay? And you're not going to be able to hover forever. A bird can't fly forever. Right? Even birds have to rest. So your business is not going to be able to stay in one place forever. Either you're going to have to grow, which means you're going to have to shed some of this garbage that you out here doing and create a product that is marketable to mass audiences and not just smelly 40-year-olds and weirdos who are on the outside of reality who want to wear wrestling is gay shirts every time they go to GCW shows. You're going to have to create an audience beyond that. Right? Which means you're going to have to do something about guys kissing each other, guys humping each other, guys stabbing each other with dildos and wrestling naked and wrestling in slow motion and all this other dumb shit they like to do. That shit's going to have to stop. All right? Because you can be as cutting edge and as forward thinking as you want. But if you're bad at business, it's bad for the business because you've done nothing but try to get people excited about something that is not going to last. Just like Paul Heyman did. Just like Ring of Honor did. Just like TNA did. Got people excited about something that was not going to last. Because you couldn't do it for the long term. Long-term success is how you change the business. If you really want to be revolutionary, you change the business through long-term success. That's kind of what it is. And the old guys know what long-term success looks like. In every situation that I talked about here, long-term success is built into it, with the exception of Rick Steiner, because that's more of a overall cultural issue. It had got nothing to do with just wrestling. But wrestling changed when the locker rooms changed. when it became less of a tight-knit group of guys who worked together, who knew each other, and just about anybody could join wrestling. Like, wrestling used to be an exclusive club. You know, that was the reason why gyms were so hard to penetrate. It's so hard to find a guy to train you and get you into business, because they didn't want everybody in the business. Now they'll let anybody in fucking wrestling. Anybody with money could get into wrestling now. And that changes everything, because you're not selectively choosing who gets to be in or not. You're not running people through the shredder to see if they really want to do this. You know, the Tough Enough thing, the changing of the developmental system, where now it's reality TV. You get to get on TV and be instantly famous. So now people are chasing wrestling just to be famous, and not just because they want to, because, you know, hey, it's a quick way to get on TV. So now that's where you get a lot of models in wrestling. And then they started getting bullied backstage because they didn't really want to be there. They were being divas. But oh no, we can't do that because the guys are mean. Oh no. And then if they be mean to the other guys, oh no, they're mean to the men too. Oh no. I'm going to write a letter to corporate and say that Bill DeMott was mean to me. And now we just got anybody in the wrestling business, and we got whiners on social media, crybabies on podcasts, people you can't really trust because they're gossiping about you and subtweeting you and all that kind of other dumb shit. They're running the Meltzer and Sean Ross Sapp whispering. That's not good for your long-term success. How is it working out for AEW with all these guys whispering about each other behind each other's backs? Is that doing great for that business? It's not. It didn't happen that often in the past. You weren't expected to talk to the fucking dirt sheets. Or if you do, you talk to them in kayfabe, right? Maybe you spread some kayfabe stuff about them. But guys in the past would just run to the fucking, like, real reporters, like the New York Times or the LA Times or some shit. Now guys will run a goddamn propaganda campaign against you and Fightful. You can't run a business that way, right? Your product doesn't look real. Nobody takes it seriously. It's not a real product, not run by real people or real men who stand for anything or have any fucking values. It's all just a bunch of weirdos chasing the bunny in the goddamn forest. I'm trying to chase this trend. No, it's not what wrestling is, man. It's embarrassing. This is embarrassing. And it doesn't matter how young or old your booker is. Only if people are expecting. Because when you look at it, you got a young booker, you know, they think the kids care about social causes. You know, this Bud Light shit, you know, the kids care about the social causes. Like, okay, really? How many kids actually care about that? You know, as opposed to people who don't care or who are actively against it. How many people really suffer from anxiety disorders and actually give a shit about Roxanne Perez and her storyline about having an anxiety disorder? Who gives a fuck? What grown man is watching this product and saying to themselves, I see myself in Roxanne Perez's anxiety? Get the fuck out. Nobody watches wrestling for that. Wrong audience. Okay? Wrong audience. Nobody watching wrestling for that shit. Nobody watches wrestling to see a depressed cowboy. Nobody watches wrestling for that. You know, we're not watching wrestling for screeds on abortion or trans kids or anything else. No, we're not watching wrestling for that shit. We know that if you go to a marketing school, they tell you that this is what the kids care about. I am telling you from experience, from the things that I see, that they don't. Okay? They don't. A lot of the stuff online that's about wokeness is what they call performative. In other words, they do it for attention. And they do it so they won't get ostracized from their friend groups. But in reality, they don't care. They really don't. I mean, how many times do people have to see that they really don't care? How many times do we have to have woke Marvel movies fail? Woke Bud Light campaigns fail? Woke cartoons fail? You know, woke Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is going to fail. Oh, how many times do these things have to fail before people realize that it's all performative? Your desires are not indicative of what is successful financially. You should not be chasing trends because trends change. So why are you chasing them? So that you can look out of date in 5 years? So you can constantly spend money trying to pretend that you're fucking cool and you're not? Guess what? It's all right. Most people's favorite movies and books and shit is old stuff anyway. Stuff that's out of date. All right? You got a bunch of people running around here. Harry Potter was written in the fucking 90s. These people are running around here building their whole life around it. Not any new movies or any new books that are written. Harry Potter. Okay? This shit was written in the 90s and in the 80s. They built their whole life around it. People still talk about Dune, a book who was written in like the 70s or something like this. It's got nothing to do with your ability to maintain on top of pop culture. They keep making movies like It. That book is old. Almost everybody's favorite book is going to be 10, 20 years old. If you're a real reader, your favorite book is going to be like 20 years old. You're a real movie guy, your favorite movie is likely to be 20 years old. Your favorite wrestler, probably over 20 years old that you had this wrestler. Nobody's favorite shit is the new shit. So why are you chasing the new thing? Build stuff with real substance and it sticks forever. Doesn't matter how old anybody is. It's only about your ability to build things that transcend time, which you can only do by not being a prisoner of the moment. Don't be a prisoner of the moment. Stop chasing trends. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.
MagMongoSlade. Best house I ever drew, Daddy.